Meryl Streep is one of the most revered and talented actresses in Hollywood history. With a career spanning over 5 decades, she has delivered unforgettable performances in films like The Devil Wears Prada, Sophie's Choice, Out of Africa, and The Iron Lady. Her ability to fully transform into her characters has earned her multiple Academy Awards and solidified her as a legend in the industry. But behind the glitz and glamour, what really happened to Meryl Streep? Why has she been making fewer public appearances in recent years? Today we take a deep dive into what really happened to Meryl Streep, her incredible career, personal life, and the truth about where she is now. Her birth certificate might say Mary Louise, but friends, family, and fans have called her Meryl for so long that it's almost hard to imagine her as anything else. That name, Meryl, was a combined invention of her first and middle names. Just like that, Mary Louise Wolfe Wilkinson Streep became Meryl Streep. One can only speculate how different the world of cinema might have been if Mary Streep appeared on our screens. Even as a child born on June 22, 1949 in Summit, New Jersey, she inhabited a background that was both practical and artistic. Her mother, Mary Wolfe Wilkinson, was an artist and editor. Her father, Harry William Streep, worked as a pharmaceutical executive. You can almost picture little Meryl soaking up her mother's creative energy while also absorbing her father's grounded approach to the world. That early mix of artistry and pragmatism would reappear many times later, especially when she decided to shift paths or demand better pay. Some of her first brushes with performance came not on a stage, but with her voice. At just 12 years old, she began taking operatic singing lessons. It's easy to imagine her practicing scales, working through classical pieces, and developing control over her voice long before she became the Meryl Streep the rest of the world knows. The dedication stuck. Decades later, she'd showcase that vocal training in films like 2012's Into the Woods and, of course, Mamma Mia. She has always had the voice, but the more interesting fact is that her earliest teenage identity also included something a bit more mainstream. She was a cheerleader in high school. Try picturing Meryl Streep in a cheerleader's uniform, rooted on the sidelines of a football field, chanting and cheering with an all-American pep. It's an amusing contrast to the formidable, sometimes fierce roles we now associate her with. On top of that, she was even the homecoming queen. Yes, Meryl Streep, the revered queen of method acting, was once an actual high school queen. If you were writing her biography as a Hollywood script, that might feel too on the nose, but it's all real. Interestingly, for a brief period, her aspirations weren't set in stone. She toyed with the idea of becoming a lawyer. The story goes that she actually missed or overslept an exam and took that as a cosmic sign that maybe the courtroom wasn't her true calling. Even though her parents might have wanted her to pursue something more conventional, she decided to trust that small twist of fate and aim for something more creative. After all, how many people look back at a missed alarm and realize it was the push they needed to chase their real passion? In a field as competitive as acting, she's had remarkably few rejections. Over the entirety of her career, she was turned down for a part she actually auditioned for only 4 times, a statistic that's almost unheard of in an industry where no is a constant chorus in performers' ears. One of those times is now legendary in the annals of Hollywood's worst regrets, courtesy of producer Dino De Laurentiis. The project was the 1976 remake of King Kong. De Laurentiis apparently took one look at a young Meryl, turned to his son, and in Italian blurted out something along the lines of, "Why do you bring me this ugly thing?" Unbeknownst to him, Meryl spoke fluent Italian, and she responded quite directly, apologizing sarcastically for not being as beautiful as he'd like. She might have lost the part, but one can only imagine the future grimace on De Laurentiis' face as Streep went on to become Hollywood royalty, stacking up Oscar nominations faster than entire studios could churn out blockbusters. Her big screen debut arrived with a small role in Julia, 1977, a film starring Jane Fonda. Although Streep's part was brief, just a flashback sequence, it was enough for her to dip her toe into the waters of Hollywood. Not long afterward, Robert De Niro caught Streep in a stage production of Anton Chekhov's The Cherry Orchard. He recommended her for The Deer Hunter, 1978, which led to Meryl's first Academy Award nomination. She might not have had a giant chunk of screen time, but it didn't matter. The camera fell in love with her, and her colleagues couldn't help but notice. De Niro, who was already a powerhouse after roles like Taxi Driver, effectively handed Streep her first big cinematic break. This was especially meaningful because Streep had once admired De Niro so deeply that she saw Taxi Driver and said, "That's the kind of actor I want to be when I grow up." It's almost poetic. The young, aspiring star admires a titan, and then the titan vouches for her, propelling her to a stage where she can fully launch her artistry. The Deer Hunter was just the beginning. In 1979, she starred in Kramer vs. Kramer, a film that would yield her first Oscar win for Best Supporting Actress. That role, ironically, was one she almost balked at. The initial script painted Joanna Kramer as an outright villain, walking out on her child and husband with minimal nuance. Streep found it too one-dimensional and pushed for rewrites, believing that real people can't be so easily labeled good or evil. Those changes gave Joanna layers, and the Academy took notice. The result? An Oscar, a triumph. She was so excited that she accidentally left the statuette behind in the washroom during the governor's ball after the ceremony. Misplacing an umbrella is one thing. Misplacing your first Oscar is quite another. Fortunately, it found its way back to her. Perhaps that moment signaled that Meryl's accomplishments would come so quickly and plentifully that one trophy more or less might be hard to keep track of. That same year, she worked with Woody Allen on Manhattan, 1979. While this might sound like a dream collaboration, Woody Allen, revered for witty scripts, and Meryl Streep, known for refining scripts, there was a snag. Allen insisted on a strictly word-for-word approach to dialogue. Streep, who was used to shaping her characters through improvised tweaks, chafed at the restriction. Once filming wrapped, they never worked together again. It's a fascinating glimpse into how even big names can clash over the question of creative freedom, especially an actress as detail-oriented as Streep, who has always insisted on characters feeling fully realized. Around this time, Streep was considered for the role of Ellen Ripley in Alien, 1979. The part eventually went to her friend and classmate Sigourney Weaver, launching Weaver's star trajectory. Sometimes even Meryl Streep doesn't get the part, but it's interesting to imagine an alternate cinematic universe in which Meryl is blasting xenomorphs out of airlocks. Early in her career, she also received a letter from screen legend Bette Davis calling her a worthy successor. That's basically Hollywood's version of a coronation, yet not everyone admired her style. Katharine Hepburn allegedly dismissed Streep as her least favorite modern actress, complaining that she could see the gears turning, click, click, click in Meryl's head. Coming from one icon to another, that's harsh, but it underscores how some old-school stars felt about method-oriented actors who approach roles with near-surgical precision. No one can deny that Streep's approach to accents and dialects is part of her mystique. Whether she's playing a Polish immigrant in Sophie's Choice or a frosty magazine editor in The Devil Wears Prada, she speaks with uncanny authenticity. For The French Lieutenant's Woman, 1981, she adopted a flawless English accent and convinced everyone, including many actual Brits, of her believability. Sophie's Choice in 1982 was another instance of intense accent work. She so thoroughly inhabited the character that she fooled native Polish speakers. That performance landed her the Best Actress Oscar in 1983. So by the early 80s, she'd tallied up 2 Academy Awards, one for supporting, one for leading, and was already being discussed as one of the greatest of her generation. Even playwright Tennessee Williams at one point wanted her for a film adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire. That never happened, but the mere fact that Williams singled her out is enough to measure the esteem she garnered in highbrow creative circles. Meanwhile, she never lost her sense of camaraderie with fellow actors. When both she and Cher were nominated for Best Actress Oscars in 1988, Streep for Ironweed, Cher for Moonstruck, Cher won. Instead of feigning delight, Streep shot up from her seat, applauding with genuine energy, so much so that Cher acknowledged her in her acceptance speech. They had worked together previously on Silkwood, 1983, forging a friendship that evidently overcame any professional rivalries. Streep's comedic side began appearing more frequently. While her reputation as a dramatic powerhouse might overshadow everything else, films like Postcards from the Edge, 1990, Death Becomes Her, 1992, and She-Devil, 1889, let her poke fun at vanity, aging, and melodrama. She proved she could be funny without losing the emotional intensity that has always been her hallmark. Sometimes critics and audiences need a reminder that serious actors can also be comedic naturals when they want to be. Yet even Meryl Streep has had dry spells. The longest she went without an Oscar nomination was 5 years, between Postcards from the Edge in 1990 and The Bridges of Madison County in 1995. That might not sound like a tragedy, but for someone who has to date racked up 21 Oscar nods, it stands out as an unusual gap. The Bridges of Madison County remains one of her most beloved performances, starring alongside Clint Eastwood in a quietly heartbreaking love story. Roger Ebert once noted that the film was not about love and not about sex, but about an idea, praising how the actors found the deeper resonance behind that concept. Streep's portrayal of Francesca broke hearts, triggered tears, and reaffirmed her status as a master of subtlety. Let's not forget that Eastwood's presence would later inspire part of her performance in The Devil Wears Prada, but we'll get to that in a bit. Her dedication to roles can be punishing. In 1999, she replaced Madonna in Music of the Heart, playing real-life violin instructor Roberta Guaspari. She practiced violin for 6 hours a day over 8 weeks to convincingly portray someone who devotes her life to teaching music. That's method for you. Painstaking, unglamorous, and absolutely thorough. She in the film earned respect even if it wasn't a smash hit. Whether practicing instruments until her fingers practically bled or perfecting an accent, Streep is never one to do something halfway. Then came The Devil Wears Prada, 2006, a turning point that introduced her to a younger generation, especially those who might not have grown up watching Kramer vs. Kramer or Sophie's Choice. Here, she played Miranda Priestley, the icy editor-in-chief of a high-fashion magazine. Initially, Streep turned down the role, feeling the pay wasn't reflective of her value to the project. The producers came back with a more appropriate number. She accepted, then promptly delivered a performance that combined subtle intimidation with unexpected vulnerability. Those around her expected Miranda to be loud, brash, and dominating. Instead, Streep opted for a hushed, controlled voice, partly inspired by Clint Eastwood's calm, raspy delivery, with a dose of her friend and mentor Mike Nichols's witty dryness. One day on set, as soon as she started speaking in that near whisper, everyone gasped. The entire portrayal was so measured and quiet that it ended up being even more terrifying and more memorable than a stereotypical dragon lady approach. She also lent her own script sculpting instincts to the film. She suggested adding 2 key scenes that peeled back Miranda's defenses. One illustrated her vulnerable side, and another hammered home the blue sweater monologue, in which the concept of trickle-down fashion gets explained so bluntly that even the audience felt chastised. Those notes gave Miranda an extra dimension, making the character more than just a caricature. In typical Meryl style, she even kept the iconic sunglasses used in the film. They re-emerged in Mamma Mia, a playful cameo item that eagle-eyed fans love to spot. Mamma Mia, 2008, showcased that Streep's singing lessons from childhood had never really gone to waste. She belted out ABBA hits with obvious joy, letting loose in a way that was rarely seen in her filmography. The film went on to become her biggest box office success, at least as of mid-2017, proving that musicals and Meryl are a winning combination. You see, she can pivot from playing a grim figure like Margaret Thatcher in The Iron Lady, for which she won another Oscar, to performing Dancing Queen on a Greek island without skipping a beat. The versatility is astonishing. When she portrayed Thatcher in 2011, she didn't just walk away with a gold statue. She also walked away with renewed perspective on how to use her influence for greater good. After the film, she donated her entire salary to the National Women's History Museum, quietly turning that role into something more than just a performance. You might call it her philanthropic streak, or maybe just a reflection of the gratitude she feels for her place in an industry that's rewarded her so richly. Whatever the motive, it's an act that underscores how off-screen she's often as admirable as the character she plays, give or take the Miranda Priestleys of the world. Her philanthropic side and outspokenness have bled into politics too. In 2014, President Barack Obama awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the nation's highest civilian honors, lauding not only her artistic contributions, but also the dignity and empathy she brings to public life. She proved that empathy again in 2017, when she received the Cecil B. DeMille Award at the Golden Globes. Rather than deliver a standard acceptance speech, she used the moment to speak out against bullying, bigotry, and disrespect. Her words, "Disrespect invites disrespect. Violence incites violence," made headlines around the globe. Regardless of whether viewers agreed or not, no one could claim that Meryl wasn't using her platform to address concerns close to her heart. That emotional sincerity might explain her spectacular track record at the Academy Awards. With 21 nominations, she's the most Oscar-nominated actor in history. The phrase Oscar's Queen gets tossed around and it fits. Where does all that success lead financially? Estimates peg her net worth at around $90 million. Not bad for someone Dino De Laurentiis once casually wrote off. Yet Meryl's sense of humor remains intact. How many Hollywood stars can say they have a Muppet named after them? Meryl Streep, a Muppet pun that practically cements her as a cultural icon. She's also descended from William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania. So there's a bit of American royalty in her lineage. But that heritage alone doesn't explain her unstoppable drive. In interviews, you might notice that she's never flaunted a technique that she specifically credits to any single teacher. In fact, one drama professor said he never really taught her anything, since she seemed to teach herself every step of the way. Part of the Meryl mystique is that she's made acting look effortless, even as she invests an enormous amount of research and rehearsal time. She once noted that she doesn't have favorites. No favorite color, no favorite food, no favorite director. She embraces variety, and it shows in her filmography, which ranges from musicals to gothic romances to political biopics to screwball comedies. She also proves that imperfection has never been an obstacle to success. She has a deviated septum, meaning her nose is slightly crooked, and she's never bothered to get it corrected. Perhaps it's that acceptance of her natural self that resonates with fans. She's physically beautiful, but not in a conventional airbrushed Hollywood sense. Over the years, she's aged on screen unashamedly, continuing to land complex, leading roles long after many actresses find themselves sidelined. That might be her greatest triumph, showing that acting is about ability and depth, not about chasing a superficial youthful aesthetic. Her approach to losing is also telling. In 1988, Cher's Oscar victory over Streep was greeted with genuine applause from Meryl, just as it had been in 1979's competition. This isn't someone who sulks over a trophy. She stands and cheers, seemingly happy to see deserving talent get recognized, whether it's her or another performer. That sportsmanlike attitude is almost as famous as her method for shaping characters. Over time, fans have taken to calling themselves Streepers, a testament to her broad, loyal following. And while some older Hollywood icons took jabs at her for being too technical, most of the modern acting world regards her as a standard bearer, the apex of her craft. Back on The Devil Wears Prada, everyone expected a tyrannical, booming presence from Miranda Priestly. Instead, Meryl studied the script and decided to go the opposite route. She evoked a kind of simmering intensity, speaking softly, yet exuding an authority that made people quake. Anne Hathaway recalled that the entire set went silent when Meryl did her first take. Nobody had envisioned such a calm, near-whisper approach, but it was electric. That moment captures so much about her style, taking a risk, refusing the obvious choice, and executing it with impeccable craft. You might wonder how she balances personal life with such a high-octane career. She's been married to sculptor Don Gummer since 1978, raising 4 children, several of whom have gone into creative fields themselves. She's famously private about her home life, rarely letting paparazzi and tabloids intrude. In that sense, she shows that it's possible to have an enduring Hollywood career without sacrificing stability. No tabloid meltdowns, no messy divorces. Instead, we see glimpses of a happy family that stands behind each other, whether it's the Oscars red carpet or an intimate dinner somewhere away from the cameras. There's an amusing coda regarding her cameo as a cheerleader in high school. Who wouldn't want Meryl Streep leading your cheer squad? The mental image alone is entertaining. The future queen of cinematic drama practicing Go Team. Chants in front of bleachers full of teenage sports fans. Perhaps it was an early sign of the confidence and stage presence she'd later harness for Shakespeare, Chekhov, or ABBA musicals. If you think about it, cheering from the sidelines is a kind of performance, rallying people, projecting your voice, adopting an almost theatrical persona of optimism and energy. In a weird way, that might have been her first taste of enthralling an audience, an experience that changed shape later when she took on epic roles, taught herself Polish, or belted out ballads with a comedic twist. Yet the Meryl Streep phenomenon isn't just about training, roles, or accolades. There's an intangible spirit behind her success, a willingness to push boundaries, to be relentless in seeking depth, and to remain gracious when recognized for her achievements. She never appears bored, even after decades of dominating award seasons. You'll see her in everything from offbeat comedic ensembles to intense character studies. One minute she's a horrifying matriarch, August Osage County. The next she's an affable aunt cheering on her niece's country music dreams, Ricky and the Flash. She picks roles that intrigue her, even if they're not obvious hits, and that's part of the reason her legacy never seems to stagnate. When she does win, she keeps it real, like forgetting her Oscar in the washroom, proving that not even Meryl Streep is immune to the occasional scatterbrained moment. When she doesn't win, she's the first to applaud the victor. That perhaps best encapsulates her essence, a passion for the craft itself, not for the shiny statues that come with it. She also proved how seriously she values representation and fairness by walking away from The Devil Wears Prada until they offered her a paycheck commensurate with her stature. Once they coughed up the right number, she immersed herself wholeheartedly in the role, eventually adding those extra layers that turned Miranda Priestly from a one-dimensional boss-from-hell caricature into a layered figure whose exhaustion, vulnerability, and subtle heartbreak simmer just beneath the surface. It's also notable that she's the only actor, male or female, to have cracked the 20-plus Oscar nominations barrier. We can glean from that statistic that she's maintained a level of excellence for an extraordinarily long time. Some call it obsession, some call it genius. Her co-stars often describe her as laser-focused, but also approachable and encouraging on set. She loves collaboration but never shies away from a strong opinion if she believes it benefits the character or the story. As a result, directors and writers often see her as both an invaluable asset and a constructive critic. If Meryl says this line doesn't ring true, you'd be wise to listen. After all, how many times has she proven her instincts to be spot on? The philanthropic side of her life often goes underreported. In addition to large donations, she's been vocal about issues ranging from women's rights to the importance of arts education. She's known to champion female directors and lesser-known playwrights, sometimes lending her star power to help them gain traction. She once said that the measure of an actor isn't just the roles they play, but the world they leave behind. She's used that vantage point to support museums, artistic organizations, and initiatives that bring performance opportunities to underprivileged communities. Fans who call themselves Streepers revere her not just for the career highlights, but for the entire package: the offbeat comedic roles, the unstoppable accent wizardry, the philanthropic heart, and the delightfully un-Hollywood approach to being one of the biggest stars in the world. She's not out there chasing tabloids or stirring up drama for attention. When Meryl Streep talks, people listen, because she rarely does so without substance. Whether she's on a talk show or receiving an honorary award, she often brings a sense of purpose to her words, sometimes comedic, sometimes earnest, occasionally pointedly political. Her performance as Margaret Thatcher in The Iron Lady is a fascinating case study. Many wondered how she'd handle portraying such a polarizing figure. Streep approached Thatcher as a human being first, someone with contradictions, passions, regrets, and vulnerabilities. Regardless of one's political stance, it was hard not to admire the sheer craft that went into that portrayal. That's part of her gift. She can humanize nearly anyone she plays. And her final gesture of donating her salary to the National Women's History Museum felt like the perfect footnote, transforming that role's controversy into a practical demonstration of her convictions. She's also proven that comedic, flamboyant musicals are well within her wheelhouse. Just watch Mamma Mia or Mary Poppins Returns, in which she cameoed. In Mamma Mia, she jammed on Greek islands, diving off docks and belting out pop anthems, presumably with a grin on her face that said, "I get to do this for a living." That's one of the joys of watching her. You sense that she truly loves the variety of experiences her career offers. It's not just about chasing prestige dramas or stacking up statues. She might be drawn to the fun, the heart, or the chance to collaborate with new talents. Interestingly, some critics have mused that Streep's only perceived flaw might be her technical brilliance, which can sometimes overshadow the emotional core of a role. But the fans and the majority of critics would argue that she harnesses technique to serve emotional truth. The audience rarely sees the wheels turning, except maybe certain old-school veterans who, like Katharine Hepburn, prefer a different style. For modern viewers, Streep's technique typically feels seamless, like a dancer who's rehearsed so rigorously that each step appears fluid and organic. Her philanthropic works, her countless transformations, her synergy with comedic partners, her philanthropic donation after playing Margaret Thatcher, all these details point to someone who's used her gifts to do more than chase success. She's leveraged it to stand for certain causes, to champion new voices, and to elevate film itself as an art form. Just like that drama professor said, no one really taught Meryl to act. She discovered it, honed it, and personalized it in a way that carved a new standard in Hollywood. The industry had seen great actresses before, but rarely one who could so effortlessly flip from a comedic cameo to a heartbreaking monologue, from belting out show tunes to scolding a subordinate in a hushed monotone that leaves them trembling. Sometimes, in quieter interviews, she'll talk about imposter syndrome or her insecurities, how no matter how many accolades she's garnered, a tiny voice inside still wonders if she's good enough. That humility might be the final piece of the puzzle. Despite the awards and the decades-long legacy, she remains deeply human. She's the cheerleader from high school who likes applause but also the overachiever who once mulled over a career in law before sleeping through the exam. She's the star who lost out on King Kong because Dino De Laurentiis made a callous remark, not realizing she could understand every word he said. She's the actress who left her first Oscar in the washroom by accident, the friend who leaps to her feet when Cher wins. She's the mother who quietly balances a family life, the actress who insisted on rewriting Joanna Kramer to be more believable, and the performer who in The Devil Wears Prada decided that silence and a near whisper were more intimidating than any loud outburst could ever be. That might be the final reason the world adores her. She trusts her instincts, stands up for her worth, and never seems to lose the spark of curiosity that likely drove her to try out for that stage production long ago. Every accent learned, every comedic bit delivered, every subtle character moment is Meryl continuing to teach herself. She wasn't content with the safe route. She sculpts each performance from scratch, leaning on an almost superhuman ear for language and an emotional intelligence that sees through to the core of every character. Even at an age when many in Hollywood are pressured out of lead roles, she keeps reemerging, defying the box some might want to put her in, and continuing to smash preconceived notions about who can carry a film, sing a ballad, or land an Oscar nomination. By now, the phrase, Meryl Streep's next role, is enough to spark excitement in fans, speculation in critics, and maybe a little dread in award show competitors. She herself might shrug and say, "I don't have favorites, I just like to do everything." That's been her modus operandi from day one, from the cheerleader uniform to the black dress on an award stage, from comedic farce to searing drama, from Bette Davis's official heir to an actress not even Katharine Hepburn's withering gaze could quell. The synergy of all these threads forms a tapestry of a life lived boldly in front of the camera, but also graciously behind it. Someone who tries to unify substance, artistry, and empathy in everything she does. Perhaps the greatest testament to her place in pop culture is the existence of a Muppet named Meryl Streep. You've truly arrived when Jim Henson's creations pay homage to you. Add that to the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the 21 Oscar nominations, and the generations of actors who cite her as an influence, and you see a figure who stands alone in many ways. She's an emblem of what's possible when one marries raw talent with relentless discipline, comedic bravery, a sense of fun, and a willingness to stand up for what you believe in. If Meryl Streep's story teaches us anything, it's that the path to greatness is winding, filled with rejections, unexpected triumphs, bold demands for better pay, lost Oscars, found Oscars, singing ABBA on a Greek island, and forging ahead with quiet intensity even when some legendary peers might have dismissed her. What's your favorite Meryl Streep performance? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.